This is Brad Paul on October 14, 1999. Who you are again, and what's your your job title here? I guess?
Sure. Well, I'm Brad Paul, and I'm the Vice President of National Promotion, which is to say I oversee various aspects of the label that have to do with creating an awareness and hopefully a demand for the records that we put out.
How long have you done that?
I've been around here since 1983, so it's a little over 16 years.
Have you done promotion the whole time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good right there. And why don't you just describe real quickly, and I know some of this, but I want to get it in your words, just how you carry out those functions. Is it radio or print publicity you try to get? I don't mean paying advertising, but what is it?
It's basically a three-pronged attack.
Okay.
It's radio promotion, trying to get the records played on the radio, keeping the radio programmers aware of the artists as they're touring around the country, trying to get the artists into the stations to do interviews, try to get the programmers to do features on the air for the artists, give away tickets, basically get the word out that artist is coming to town when they are coming to town, and when they're not, just hopefully making sure the record is on the playlist as much as possible. The print promotion is basically trying to get print media to write about our records, record reviews, features, cover stories, and starting off with the publications that are specifically geared toward that kind of music. So we're in touch with publications like Bluegrass Unlimited and Living Blues, the Old Time Herald, things like that are specifically geared towards the various kinds of genres that we deal with, on up to making efforts to get things written about in national publications and major market dailies. For example, the Alan Lomax series is going to be written about again in the New York Times this weekend, featuring an article about our Alan Lomax series called a particular part of the series called the Deep River Song, which covers the music of the Mississippi.
Now that's already gotten a considerable amount of press, which I assume you were involved in. But with respect to something like, say, this weekend's article, did they come to you since they already were probably aware of the series, or did you help plant that, or this organization?
Well, we try as much as possible to plant the idea and be in touch with them, suggest ideas. A lot of times people come to us.
Yeah, and in that case, what happens? I mean, as I say, that's already out there. People know about it.
Well, usually what happens is they'll get an idea, they'll come to us for more information, we'll supply them with the background, with press kits and photo, whatever materials they need to help flesh out the article.
Okay.
Put them in touch with whomever they need to interview, if it's the artist particularly or a producer that they want to talk to. So we're in many ways a conduit between the writer and the creator, the artistic creator. And then the third prong is essentially what you call tour support. When artists are out there touring, we try to be as helpful as we can to work with the concert promoter to make sure that when they've booked a concert with a rounder artist, they know that with that is going to come a certain amount of support from the record label, even if it's just a touching base by telephone to ask if they need additional press kits or posters. If there's anybody in the media in their particular market that they think we should follow up with that we may not be aware of, try to work as a team.
Now, over 16 years, has there been a change out there in the among the people who work in these three areas that you stated, not among print media, among radio people, maybe among promoters? Has there been a change in their awareness around her in general and their perception of what the label is? A change that's significant enough for you to articulate?
Well,
yes or maybe no.
No, there's been a huge change insofar that it's much harder to get music played on the radio. It's much harder to get these records written about in print. It's much harder to get bands booked in clubs for a variety of reasons. Some of it has to do with on the radio level with deregulation and the consolidation of broadcast signals and ownership of broadcast signals.
In other words, common ownership will play the same stuff pretty much. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or it's just a little bit more complicated. When you have deregulation and the number of stations that a particular company or corporation can own goes up,
Okay.
then there's a feeding frenzy. So corporations are running around trying to buy up as much of the real estate as they can,
Right.
which is driving the price of the individual radio stations up.
Okay.
So a station that when I first started maybe sold for $1 million now sells for $40 million.
Okay.
You're talking about an economy of scale that's going up and up and up, so that the people who are owning that $40 million property don't want to hear about some experimental format that's
Every
playing
listener.
cool roots music. They want to know.
Every listener is more valuable.
They want to know that they're playing lowest common denominator music that's going to bring in the highest numbers to make their ratings, so that they can charge the maximum amount of dollars for advertising, so they can afford to pay their debt that they're carrying to purchase all these radio stations. On the print side of things, there's a lot of economic factors involved, but basically the bottom line is the same with television. They want to know that the artist that they're putting in their magazine or the artist that they're putting on their television show has a name factor that's going to bring in listeners or bring in people to buy their magazine. So they're much less reluctant to write about the up-and-coming star of tomorrow. They want to write about today's star because
They're more reluctant. They're less reluctant. They're more reluctant to write about.
I'm sorry, they're more reluctant
Okay.
to write about the up-and-coming trend, or this cool little niche music over here, or this artist that shows great promise that nobody's heard of. Whereas it used to be, take a magazine like Rolling Stone. I mean, they would oftentimes pride themselves on being there first to write about somebody that you hadn't heard about, that keep your eye out on this. And then these days it's like, getting on a show like the Conan show, even just in the last 5 years, has gone from being kind of edgy and booking cool music that you never heard to well, we're only doing 2 music shows a week now, we kind of need to make sure there's some marquee value in the names that we do book. So the access to the media is shrinking.
What about the identity of the label, what Rounder is? And I don't mean internally, I mean out there in the rest of the world. Is there some sense among radio or among print media in the music print industry that they recognize Rounder as X, a certain type of label, and has that changed in 16 years?
I think there's a percentage-wise, probably more people know Rounder. I think there's still the vast majority of people, particularly when you're talking about more mainstream media, have a perception of Rounder as being a folk label. For the most part, what we do is, that's great stuff, but you know what, it really doesn't, excuse me, doesn't apply to what we're doing here.
Right.
Among the, public radio, the more esoteric publications like No Depression or Sing Out, to a certain degree, in those circles we're somewhat revered as, by God, if it were not for Rounder, who would be doing this? But when you move over to the more mainstream, it's like, oh yeah, they're a cool little label. They've been around for a long time. Isn't it cool what they do? And that's great, but we don't ever play their stuff on our radio station.
And do you find people have no perception of the breadth of the catalog or even the numbers in the catalog? Is that the case?
I think probably that again, when you get away from our core constituency, there's probably really not recognition for how big a company really is, and the volume of music that we have in our catalog.
Okay. How do you handle, or do you handle, I don't know if it falls within your realm or elsewhere, how do you handle the stuff that Rounder puts out that isn't national touring stuff per se? How do you handle a banjo record or something like that?
Well, to a certain degree over the years, we've developed lists of writers and radios, programmers who, died for this stuff.
Uh-huh.
And oftentimes it's just a matter of making sure they get the record.
Okay.
So, in some circles, a box comes in the mail with a rounder label on it. It's Christmas to that person.
Sure,
So,
no depression.
Yeah,
Dirty linen.
yeah,
Okay.
Old Time Herald, or, the community radio station that, has 2-hour banjo show on Sunday, or, and a 5-hour reggae show on Friday, and, a 3-hour Cajun show on Tuesday, those
Do you
types of
do all those
stations.
mailings?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Do you maintain lists of
Mhm.
Cajun shows and reggae shows? And
I'll show you my database. I probably have over 20 genres on our radio database
I want
mailing.
to see that.
Yeah.
That'd be really helpful. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to get a fix on
Sure.
how do you sell a trio KDN or something like that. These
Yeah.
are people who tour, but they tour in the U.S. They only tour at festivals
Yeah.
and seasons. They're not going to go out and do clubs.
No, I mean, we've spent years developing a database of every little community radio station, public radio station, college radio station that has some outlet for this kind of music.
Okay.
And they're out there, whether it's KGNU in Boulder, WUMB in Boston, KDNK up in Aspen, Colorado, or KUSF in San Francisco. They're out there, and there are people that have been doing shows on some of those stations for years and developed their own little following. What concerns me is that what I see happening more and more is that we're not able to sell the same numbers of records based on the kind of airplay that we've been able to rely on to get the word out. It used to be we could sell a certain amount of records by making sure that all the bluegrass DJs had the new James King record or whatever, and through that kind of airplay and through public reviews and publications that cater to that audience, we could sell X number of records. And so is the case for a singer-songwriter or for a blues record or whatever. And it just seems to me, I see the numbers, we're getting the same kind of airplay, the specialty programming airplay, the niche airplay, the niche print coverage, but it's not selling the same number of records. And I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure if it's because the distribution is moving into a direction that's just more numbers oriented and doesn't want to deal with the sort of hand selling that, it's a lot easier. I mean, right now we're being distributed on 2 different levels, and both independent and major branch. Neither one of them seem to be selling the kind of numbers on that smaller market stuff.
Okay.
That we used to.
Can you, I don't know how this could be done, but you would know. Can you track the efficacy of a given radio show, for example, whether that sells in that market? Can you try and pinpoint it that well? If you send it to, if you send records to a bluegrass station in North Carolina, can you tell? Is anybody paying attention to whether it's selling within that range or not?
It can be done by virtue of SoundScan.
Uh-huh.
You can look at we can go and say, okay, well, we're getting airplay on this show, and Eugene, Oregon,
Huh.
and you can look up Eugene, Oregon on the SoundScan and see if you sold any records.
Is that cost effective? You even bother for small records?
I think that it's probably not worth the effort.
Yeah.
But I think that part of the problem, getting back to what I was saying a minute ago about selling fewer records, is that I think that SoundScan has hurt that insofar as even in larger markets, we'll say, well, we're getting airplay on this Americana station in Dallas, and marketing people will look at the SoundScan and they say, yeah, well, we only sold 20 records that week in Dallas. So it sort of just gets discounted,
Okay.
Whereas in the reality exists, well, who knows, maybe that person's buying it on the internet. Maybe they're buying it at a store that doesn't do SoundScan. Maybe they bought it off the stage when the artist came through town.
Yeah.
Who's to say? And so I think it becomes hard to accurately account for the sales resulting from that kind of airplay, but because there's sound scan, and that's viewed as the real barometer, whether it's totally accurate or not, it's looked at as that this is the deal, this is what we sold, and therefore airplay on the station doesn't matter.
Right.
And so it develops a sort of self-defeating prophecy where it's, oh, well, okay, so you got to play on Y95. They don't sell records.
Yeah. Now, what do the folks out here do? I'm motioning outside this room. I assume they work for you.
The two publicists, they divide up the projects by genre. One does blues, jazz, and world. The other does bluegrass, folk, and country.
Okay.
I've got 4 radio people, divided up by formats pretty much. One does college, one does Americana and bluegrass, one does AAA, some AC crossover, and the other does blues and jazz.
Why don't you tell me what AAA encompasses? I read about it all the time.
AAA is it's really a euphemism. Really, the letters are supposed to stand for Album Adult Alternative. Sort of getting back to the idea, originally was getting back to the idea of, you remember AOR, album-oriented rock.
Sure, which I know well.
And, that was supposed to be what, rock and roll radio in the 70s was, and the idea was that it didn't play singles like Top 40.
Right.
So, they'd maybe play the 3rd, 4th track into the Led Zeppelin record or into the Allman Brothers record or whatever it was. And that sort of morphed into really being a singles-dominated format. And so the idea of adult album alternative was an idea, or was a movement to get back to the idea of playing, looking at albums.
Deeper into the album.
Playing more cuts deeper into the album, not being focused on singles.
But is it,
and having a wider playlist and appealing to, a 29, 45, 49 demographic, the sort of aging baby boomer, people who grew up on rock and roll, but weren't particularly interested in, the current version of rock and roll. Were more interested in, artists that have been making records for a long time, whether it be Bonnie Raitt or Eric Clapton, as well as people who were coming up, sort of newer people like Sean Colvin or Sheryl Crow. Artists like that really got their initial airplay started at AAA stations. Where are you? You're in Texas?
Yeah.
Austin. KGSR is a AAA station. Here in Boston, WBOS, The River, WXRV.
Well, you can respond. This is something that I've noticed, KG. Every now and then I tend to listen to the radio only when I'm in the car and listen to CDs at home. But every now and then I'll hear KGSR play. They'll play, they'll play Creedence's Fortunate Son or something like that, which is the type of thing you're talking about. And one day I'll hear it, and then I'll notice, and I'll say, oh, how eclectic, they've dug back, they're pulling this. Then I'll notice that I'll hear Creedence's Fortunate Son a lot for 14 days, and then I won't hear it anymore. It's like they do a playlist, they kind of rotate things in and out, and they do that, and so it gives this impression, because they figure not everybody's listening at the same time, or, is that what they do? Do they pull things in?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Cycle them for a little while, and dump them, and, but it's very planned.
Yeah.
Now, that still doesn't encompass all your genres. It still sounds like it encompasses, rock and kind of milder rock for adults and like the grunge stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
AAA is not going to play bluegrass by and large.
No, not at all.
Okay. And the adult contemporary, is that AC? What was the fourth one you said?
AC.
Yeah.
We don't do much of it. Occasionally, we're just getting ready for an Alison Krauss campaign with a single of hers. It's been 4 years since we had a record of that format with Cheryl Wheeler about 4 years ago. So, not much of what we do is appropriate for the format.
Okay. How do you prioritize? How do you decide? Obviously, these people got, I don't know how many records you get in a month or 6 months, but it's a good number. How do you?
At label meetings, we review the upcoming projects and determine what the priorities are based on sales expectations and what we perceive as being the potential. Okay. And the priorities generally end up being one of two things: the tops in their genre. So you might have a Rhonda Vincent, for example, who will be a priority because as far as bluegrass goes, she could rule the roost.
Right.
And there may be some potential for crossing over there, and then probably some good press potential generally out beyond the bluegrass mags.
Right.
You know, it might be somebody that we feel has the potential to go beyond whatever specific genre they're coming out of to have a broader appeal. So like Susan Tedeschi last year, you know, we've got, you know, basically a blues-based act, but feeling there being that we could cross it over onto AAA, get it, you know, off of the blues shows onto a regular AAA format, and take it from there.
Now this is a little beside the point, I guess. Now she's on Tone Cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not around her own label, it's a
No,
distributed label.
correct.
So you handle those as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. How much stuff is gonna? I'm trying to think of something that I can pick out. What do you do with? I don't know, Cape Breton fiddling or something like that. The label still puts out, you know,
Mhm.
some amounts of that stuff. You know, how
That's
do
the same thing with the banjo record. You know, we have a list of people who are into traditional folk music. You know, I don't have a Cape Breton list per
Right.
se, but I would slot that into people who are generally interested in traditional folk. I do have a Celtic list, so I would make sure they got a copy of it as well. And again, it's with those people, it's really just a matter of getting the record to them. We don't have the luxury to be able to afford, nor does it really make sense with the kind of sales that you're going to get from it, to follow up on the telephone with each and every one of them to
Right.
make sure they got it.
Yeah.
But that network is pretty attentive, and generally, if we put out a record and they don't get it, they'll call us.
Okay.
You know.
So in a sense, with respect to real traditional stuff, you do in fact rely upon the network itself that is just independent arounders, and that's interesting because
Yeah.
I'm kind of writing about that network in a sense.
Yeah.
Writing about the Local Alliance crowd and
Oh, sure.
stuff like that.
I mean, there are times when we'll get calls from some people who will say, "Hey, I've heard you're doing a record by so-and-so," and we're like, yeah, okay, well, let me check out. And sure enough, you know, record deal has been signed. You know, we haven't even been told about it yet, but somehow, you know, the grassroots network out there already knows about it.
How often do you kind of check sales figures and compare them with what your people are doing to see if it's something needs a push or something needs to be stopped? And do you go both ways, pushing something or stopping something?
Well, you know, primarily that's basically that kind of scrutiny is confined to the priorities.
Okay.
You know, 'cause beyond the priority level, there's really not that much proactive stuff that we're doing. You know, I suppose you could make an argument if you wanted to really try to micromanage the situation. You could make an argument for evaluating how much time people spend fielding incoming requests. So, you know, because there's certainly, as I say, you know, there's this network for all these different niche genres out there, and they're always calling up saying, you know, I didn't get this, can I get that? You know, can I get that record? Or I'm going to write a feature, can you get, you know? So if you wanted to try to make an analysis of how much time my staff spends answering and following up those incoming requests versus how many records we sell, I don't know. That's a hard one to say, but again, that's for those kinds of records, we rely on those people. It's our only network to let people know those records exist, and if they called up and we just shut them down, you know, I think that would be pretty detrimental.
Probably ultimately you get some kind of intuitive sense of what's worth an annual salary in terms of sales figures. You got to have people do all this,
Right.
and pay them benefits and what have you.
Exactly.
How many priorities are running at a given time?
Oh, it can range between 8 and 12.
Okay. Is there an effort made to pull them across genres, or if the priority is just in what you sense is going to sell, fall into one area, do you just go with that?
Well, you know, like I said, there are some of the criteria based to designate a record as being priority has to do with the intuitive sense as to whether we think that can break out beyond the genre. So I use Susan Tedeschi as an example. What's a more recent possibility? The Rice, Hellman and Peterson record. You know, that's a record that seems to have fans from a lot of different areas.
Name recognition.
You know, this
all
name
over
recognition,
yeah.
whether it's the Byrds
Yeah.
or the Desert Rose Band, or Tony Rice Quintet or David Grisman Quintet or whatever. The bluegrass, there's connections going back to the early J.D. Crowe band. So, so there's bluegrass fans, there's rock and roll fans, there's folk rock fans. So that that's a record that you can see touching on a variety of bases. Natalie McMaster, somebody totally in the pocket of a Cape Breton artist, but doing stuff that's pretty hip and groundbreaking in a lot of ways. And so we're trying to find ways to bust out of that traditional folk mold and say, okay, AAA radio, why don't you play this track here? Because listen to it. Don't listen to the rest of the record. Just listen to this first cut,
right,
and see if it could work for you. Because that we think it could.
Now I saw her in Austin. In a little tiny place. Now she's obviously young. She's really pretty. She was a great show.
Yeah.
Do those things come into play?
Oh, absolutely.
Yourself?
The fact, what is their live show like? How easy are they to work with? If you have an artist that doesn't like to do interviews, has a poor infrastructure, doesn't have good management, it's hard to schedule appearances and interviews and promotional things. If those things are in the way, then they don't stay priorities for long.
Okay.
You've got to have a situation where they can work with us.
I think I understand what you're saying, but do you, for example, say something like, and it doesn't sound like you do, and I'm just trying to get a sense of it, do you say, we have no blues priority this week, so we got to get a blues priority if it's not naturally developed?
No, not at all.
Okay. It's just those other factors about, is the artist going to work? Can you sell his,
How much are they touring? What's their show like? What's the record like? Does the record have potential? If it's a blues record, can we get it played on a rock station?
Right, but not
if it's a
not
blues,
simply.
or can we get it played on a black urban station?
Right.
The Wilson Pickett record, for example, we're going after urban AC, AAA, and the usual blues suspects.
Right. I'd love to see maybe the database.
Yeah, sure. Just a minute.
We turn our attention now to Bing Broderick, again, October 14, 1999. What's your job here, Bing?
Generally speaking, what I do is I sell Rounder product to everything outside of conventional record retail.
Okay.
And that involves a lot of different mail order companies, a lot of specialized distributors, people like Irish music distributors, Latin music distributors, Judaica distributors, and pretty much the breadth of the catalog. We try and find distributors that serve the communities that the music is coming from.
How long have you worked here?
I started working here in 1987. Took a
Same
year.
position?
In this position since 1992.
Okay, what were you before?
I worked for Folkways for a couple of years before that, and prior to that, I started picking orders for stores, worked for the mail order for a little while.
Folkways, that would have been before the sale to the Smithsonian,
It was actually after.
Okay.
Rounder was the distributor for Folkways from 1989 to 1992, and from 1990 to 1992, from 1990 to 92, I worked for the label. Most of it was based at the Smithsonian, but they had two people who were based here.
Okay, I guess I was. I thought you said you were here from 87.
I was.
But you weren't a Rounder employee all that time.
Right.
Got it. Okay, that's what I mean. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, but you were doing a similar thing, and often with Rounder distributed product.
Exactly.
Okay, I got it. And what's your staff situation like? How do you divide up what you do among people, or are there different functions? Brad, for example, was telling me he's got radio, print, and tour support. Is there something equivalent?
In special marketing
in
itself?
terms of what you do? You divide up,
basically, there's two of us in the department.
you wouldn't have
Right.
the same.
And Patsy does all the data entry, which is a lot of the orders coming in.
Okay.
And I tend to try to do more. I work a lot more with the artists because in addition to doing what I do, I work with our children's artists. And some on artist development, some on just managing Raffi, not managing as a, in a sense, but all details relating to Raffi and to the Arthur license. We put out a recording that's associated with the Arthur TV program.
Okay.
Those things all fall to me because I'm the kids specialist.
I see.
Because I sell all the kids catalogs.
I see.
So, yeah, it's interesting. When I started doing this, I was doing this job while I was working for Folkways, I was also doing this job 1 day a week.
Okay.
And in 1992, I said, look, I can make a full-time job of this. And then it only moved further from there.
Does your job involve promotion, or is it purely sales, or is it an amalgam?
It's a little bit of everything.
Because I gather that in the other areas of the company, there's sales and there's
Right.
promotion, which is
Right.
grad,
Right.
and you're dealing with non-record store sales. Is anybody promoting to those people other than you?
Well, the promotion department is to some degree, and I'm also supplementing that somewhat where I have connections.
Okay.
Marketing-wise, I have to do a lot of. If we have, let's say, for example, a Natalie McMaster record,
Right.
that is going to be very popular with our Celtic accounts, our Celtic distributors, as well as our women's music distributors. We're trying to really, I think there's a lot of appeal for her there. So I'm working, getting them all the information, trying to do whatever programs I can with the Women's Bookstore Network, Women's Bookstore Network. I also work with things, special accounts that are not record store accounts, like the Nature Company, Toys R Us, those kinds of things.
Okay. How would you, so you don't depend simply on orders, on filling orders?
Well, when it comes down to it, at the end of the month, that's mostly what I'm reporting. But that I don't have a very narrow view of. I mean, I'm doing all of that, right? It's not
okay.
just the filling the orders.
Okay.
I also have recently been working on trying to develop relationships with companies where using the archive that Rounder has in terms of music to put together new collections that for premiums for companies. I was right now working on one for a train manufacturer, a model train manufacturer of classic train songs.
Okay.
Those kinds of things. I'm working on something with Mrs. T's Pierogies, a polka compilation. Trying to work out something with Zapp's Potato Chips in New Orleans for a Cajun compilation.
And how did, let's take that last one, for example. How did that come about?
Me approaching them. Here's a company which has a demographic that is, largely Cajun.
And how did you know that? I mean, how does one learn about it? What's the name of this company?
Zapp's Potato Chips.
How does one learn about Zapp's Potato
There's a number
Chips?
of people who are there's a number of people who are from New Orleans, but I've had them from trips to New Orleans.
Okay.
But that's I've been sort of trying to find those kinds of niches where it's a perfect match for us in terms of they're excited about the idea.
What is it that you're going to do with Boz?
Probably something like a 5-song compilation that will be available for $1.
Okay.
Send in 3 proofs of purchase and $1 plus shipping and handling or something.
And you get a 5-song Cajun
6
compilation
songs, 7
about
songs.
potatoes, if you can.
Exactly. It's fun. I love digging through our catalog and finding things. I had a great time working on the compilation for the train company.
What kind of, who was the company? And what
It's a company called. This is something that probably shouldn't until whatever
Oh,
comes
okay.
out. Just so
Well-
you know. No, I mean I can tell you, but it
Okay.
just shouldn't be printed anywhere.
I'm not writing
Right.
anything.
MTH Trains.
Uh-huh.
They are Lionel's big competition, and this is the idea was to put together a collection of music. You're always looking for the right blend of songs. You want to include, the classic songs, John Henry, Casey Jones.
Right.
You want a consistency of sound.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit challenging because, while we may have 10 versions of Casey Jones, is any one just the right sound for this record?
Yeah.
Do you want instrumentals? Do you want vocals over instrumentals? Those kinds of questions.
Do you work with libraries and schools?
I used to, and we have since passed that over to Gail McIntosh. She now, since she does all the marketing for the mail order division,
Okay.
and they went through the mail order division, we decided that it would be best for her to handle those.
Okay, and again, since I know she's not
Right.
here, but in your experience, is that something that would simply respond to inquiries, or would you try and sell the Lomax collection, for example, to the University of Texas or something like that? Or?
What we did was we tried to, we would always attend the ALA conferences and stuff and present things, but we made a really strong effort early on with the Lomax collection by offering the first 12 as a subscription series, where we had 3 of them out or 4 of them out. We sold the whole set at $120, and you would get them as they came out.
Right.
And that was I think we probably sold over 600 sets that way.
Yeah, corresponds. I think Bill was telling me about 800. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
in the same ballpark.
right. I didn't follow up after a certain point, but that was, and it worked out great, because some of those titles might have sold 800 alone anyway, on their own, you never know. At that point, we really didn't know how they were going to do.
Would you touch in some way some of the newer obscure things that Rounder puts out, the type of stuff that's never going to be a priority on Brad's list? Do you know, well, I don't know if you know,
Sure.
producer Mark Wilson, who's outside the company. He
Right.
does this whole series, which is now being kind of packaged as North American
Right.
traditions, and there's no conventional way to market. Well, Brad does it in that he sends the releases to certain designated lists and whatever.
Right.
But presumably there are other
Well-
ways of getting those into people's hands, or at least making people aware of them. Are you involved in?
Yeah, there's some success we've had, with those, with a number of accounts that we have. One is the West Virginia Highways Department. They sell them, sell CDs on
The rest stops?
yeah, exactly.
Also, they want
Local,
indigenous
right?
music.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it's very smart. Another thing we recently have developed is a relationship with the national parks, where it used to be that if they inquired we'd respond, but we actually send new release sheets to all of the regional buyers, so that it's broken down. There's however many parks in each system, but they'll have 6 regional buyers for the country who oversee a certain region, and they'll know that, these Cajun releases will be of interest to Jean Lafitte, historic something in New Orleans. So
I'll put them in the gift shop?
right.
Okay.
So that's a fun way that we've been able to do that. Another, example of the kind of thing, I'm thinking of someone like Skip Gorman, who does cowboy songs, and we've had great luck recently. There's a company that used to be a Native American music company called Four Winds Trading, and they recently also expanded into cowboy, and they've been doing great with Skip's stuff. So it's things like that supplement the regular record store sales.
Right.
And occasionally you'll get a title, something like Hollerin'.
Yeah, I own
which-
Hollerin', but nobody else in the
Right,
universe does.
right.
I bought Hollerin' because I'm working on Rounder, and it was the weirdest thing I could think of.
Exactly, it's right up there.
So,
And-
what do you do with Hollerin'?
Well,
He's on
we
Spivey's
actually,
corner.
we found, actually, I think we even had the Rivertown Trading Company, the wireless audio. Are you familiar with that?
I've seen the wireless catalog.
That's
What is-
Garrison Keeler's. It all stems out of Prairie Home Companion.
Okay.
But they even picked it up.
Where else have you sold hollering?
Well, there's a company called the Archie McPhee Company, which sells all sorts of doodads and toy kitsch stuff. And I think it's the only recording they've ever carried. But they just thought it was that whack that they had to carry it.
This is a mail order company?
Yeah, they do a lot of sort of, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's like Mr. Potato Head kind of stuff, but they'll do those dolls that you squeeze them and their eyes pop out and their ears go out, those things. They do all kinds of stuff like that, but they love this. So, it's a combination of finding the, something like Sacred Harp singing.
Yes.
There are these associations of Sacred Harp singers. I just got a phone call this morning from a Georgia association. They wanted to know about all of our Sacred Harp recordings. So it really often is a matter of just tapping into the genre, and occasionally you'll have a more elusive market where it doesn't quite fit the way, or there's not a system already set up to sell the music of the community, or at least it's not as readily available. It's much easier for us if we can sell to a distributor and they can sell to the individual stores.
Right.
But occasionally we'll have to just set up with the individual stores to make it happen, because there is no distributor.
You go after chambers of commerce or
on specific titles we might, depending on the title. I mean, if we're doing something that's specifically, North Carolina banjo collection or something like that, we might do something like that. And, but it has to be a pretty specific thing.
And I noticed I used the word go after, which again implies that you're going to do active selling, and I guess I'm a little unclear as to how much.
Yeah, well, we definitely do. Where we see a possibility, we go after it. It's not like a classic sell. So a lot of our people don't respond to that.
Yeah.
And with some people you have to do that. With a nature company or something like that, you do have to do that, or you'll just get, passed by.
Sure, but you also know that they buy a certain amount of records. They're not a record store, they
Right.
do sell records.
Right.
Everybody knows that.
Right,
And,
exactly.
so that would be, you could set that up in a more traditional way.
Exactly.
As opposed to, hollering or selling it at one store in Spivvy's Corner or
Right.
something like that. Do you tap into ethnic associations that can exist? They can exist anywhere. It's probably hard that there could be
It depends.
millions of them. There must be Irish associations.
Sure.
Boston, Chicago, New York, San Francisco. I don't know.
To some degree, from a promotional standpoint, we'll do that in order to get word out
If it's
in
on
the real
Brad's
grassroots level.
database, and you explain
Right.
to me how that works.
Or one that we may add to that, or we may say, hey, with this special release we should contact these people.
Will they do specific things, one-shot promotions with esoteric things?
Yeah, I mean, if it's,
Well, has it happened?
yeah. And, even we did some of this with, I'm trying to think if there was one recently. We put out a recording called Sosabi, which is Cape Verdean music from New England. A lot of the elders of the Cape Verdean community have preserved a musical style that is, very, I guess it's disappearing.
Yeah.
And this recording really documents that. We were able to contact a lot of the local press, and and outlets. We were provided with the information and did mailings for that in the same way.
When you say provided with the information, what information you talking? You mean?
About the various associations, cultural associations.
Oh, I see. Okay, and you got that from people who were
From Dan, the guy, Dan Kahn, who produced the
who
record.
did the record, okay. And you mailed out to these groups?
Yeah.
Did you get any sales that you know of, or-
Some, yeah. Yeah. And what actually also worked very well with that is actually a number of the artists have sold the record very well. And I don't know that they would have sold the record if we hadn't really gone after them and said, hey, here's a chance for you to sell this record.
Sure.
And it's been great. I mean, one is probably reordered 4 times. So that's, that adds up.
Now, Holleran's pretty whack. How do you deal, I don't know, with something like, just can't, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Rebettica songs
Rebettica.
from the Greek underground?
It's a very interesting one. That's one that sort of came to mind in terms of a market that I wish we were able to tap into better. There is a company in Queens, in Astoria, which is a Greek music distributor, that has not yet picked up our stuff. And partly because I think, and this is something that you encounter recurringly with our stuff, you might find the distributor for Greek music, but they don't care about the old stuff.
Interesting, okay.
It's true to some degree with the Latin market, though we've found who in the Latin market is more pop-oriented and who is willing to take the chances on, other stuff.
Well, in that sense, they parallel the bulk of the U.S.
Right, exactly.
They don't-
No,
it's
exactly.
different.
No, except with the Greek one, and what's frustrating is that we still haven't found someone who will
Uh-huh.
sell the traditional. And we are coming out with more traditional stuff, and I am actually going to make a stronger effort to find it, because I just feel like we're missing something here, and the more we put out, the more we're missing it.
Right.
So
What portions of your job are kind of prosaic, what do you do, the entire Philo catalog, which is not difficult, presumably, or, Lynn Miles, that, I think is a very, very great
Right.
record
Right.
to listen to at home and stuff. What do you do with that stuff? You just get it out to record companies? I don't know if you work with record
no,
companies.
with something like Lynn Miles, we would, I worked very heavily with women's bookstores. When we have a record like that, we will often do a mailing to the Feminist Bookstore Network, which is about 120 women's bookstores that buy through Lady Slipper and Goldenrod, which are the 2 leading women's music distributors. And we will, do mail posters to the stores, call them up, see if they are interested in seeing Lynn or Natalie McMaster when they come to the town. We could go through the itinerary.
You don't send them the disc.
Oh, we do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we definitely
You
do.
send them a sample?
Yeah. We will probably send about a dozen records a year to those stores.
So whenever you want to make somebody aware of a disc, you send them the music, you just don't send them a description.
And, often that's not enough. Getting them to listen to that disc is another thing.
So you need some print.
Right. Exactly.
Somebody you got to open it.
We had an interesting one recently, which was, it's called the Feminist Bookstore Network, but it's actually largely gay and lesbian clientele.
Right.
And what's interesting is we sent our first mail record to that market earlier this year, a record by DeVell Crawford, who's a New Orleans piano player. And, it was a sort of a stretch, sort of saying he's gay and very open about being gay and all. And we just recently got a pretty big order from one of the women's distributors.
You actually, I don't know how aware you were, you tapped into, I think, a sensibility that I've read about, that lesbians and gay men are often antagonists and they need to unite more for common political battles, which
Right.
always exist.
Well, and it's an interesting thing because I had long talks with both of the women's music distributors about it, about trying to find where things come together, where the women's music community tends to be very supportive of women singer-songwriters. There's not a sort of corollary in the men's market. It's not. It doesn't tend to be supportive of the same in the same way. But it was nice to see this record get that response, because I think we knew when we did it that it was kind of a shot in the dark.
How do you
But
tell how well it's working? I mean, do you have to rely on reorders? You don't know what's sold. There's no sound scan, which is in
Right.
many respects anyway. So how do you know what's worthwhile?
a lot is staying in touch with those distributors, asking them how things are going. Another indicator is when you start getting returns.
Okay, and so that common rule in the industry applies. They can send them back to you.
Right.
Okay. Do you have to issue checks on how that works?
It's credit.
Okay, it's always done.
Right. Right. And you can get, it's interesting because you're right, in those kinds of markets you don't have sound scanning. And you can have a record that scans, I have records that sell well for me where scans represent 10% of what we've shipped.
I'm not understanding you, so.
We can have we can put out a record that will ship 15,000 copies of.
Okay, Rounders, that's what Rounder will send out to the world.
Right.
Okay.
And that record a year later might have scanned 1,500 units.
Got it. Okay.
And yet, that doesn't mean that
It's sold
2,000 units sold. We're not seeing returns on those records.
Yes.
So my guess is that there are probably 3,000 sitting in stores,
Yeah.
but the other 12,000 has sold.
Right.
And that does you're right, I mean, it gets into this very interesting question of it's hard to keep a sort of solid grasp on how records are selling as a result.
That's the big question. I'm kind of interested broadly in how Rounder can sell the more obscure things in its catalog, which are the types of things that this company was founded upon, and no
Right.
longer. It was not founded upon with Miles. It would have been anathema to Ken Irwin
Right.
20 years ago.
Right.
I don't know if she still is or not. She may still be for all I know.
Right.
But
No, I think that it's not, but it's interesting.
some things are.
Right, sure.
But I don't think she is in particular. In fact, I was with him at a show.
Right.
She's just so good.
Yeah.
But are there talks within the company in which you are looked at as a way in which they're going to be able to keep alive the stuff that the company started with? What's
Often,
about that?
prior to a project coming out or even being agreed upon, there may be a dialogue of what do you think you can do with this record?
Okay.
I mean, there's certain records where it's clear it's not going to sell at retail. And it's in times like that they'll ask me, and I may also then go to accounts.
Go to accounts?
Go to my account
I got it.
and ask. I just recently had a similar question from Stefan Grossman, who runs Festival Videos. Stefan has a video in the works that's it's a pretty popular interest, and he is trying to figure out whether it makes sense to put it out on DVD. And so he's looking to me to go to and find out exactly what degree, is it time yet? That kind of thing. But I do get consulted a lot about that kind of thing, and And there are things that I wish I could sell better. Things like our Heartbeat handles the reggae distributors, but I can't sell reggae to almost any of my accounts, aside, given that the reggae submarket is taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating. Unless it's a ska title or or a bigger name.
Right.
But even then, it's tough.
Do you prioritize the releases in the way that promotion does? They'll have 8 to 12 priorities going on at any given time, Brad said to me, in terms of who's going to get real attention.
I don't do it in this formal way. I will work on projects. For example, let's say Natalie McMaster's on tour. We want to get these women's bookstore folks out to the shows.
Yeah.
That's our project for this week. That's one project for this week.
Okay.
I don't tend to say we're going to focus on these records at the expense of anything else. I tend to, partly because some of the smallest records are often very important for me.
Okay. It's hard to see spending any time at all on hollering for the potential return, except that you happen to get enamored with the idea of doing it for a day or two. I don't know how long it took you to.
Oh, it didn't take long, and it was just an offbeat sort of check. I called up. I said, "Are you interested in this?" And the guy said, "Oh, let's see that."
Do you look at how many releases a month does Rounder do? What is it, about 12 to 15? I know it varies by month.
Maybe I would say it's more like 25.
A month? Okay.
20 to 25, yeah.
Okay, so do you go down this list and do you touch everything?
Yes.
Or do you strike things
when
out
we
and
get,
say,
no, when Patsy and I get our solicitation sheets, we sit down and we go over who's going to get each title.
Okay.
So that is sort of the first thing. We get them the new release sheets, but we also then get them, and a lot of people, we won't send the whole new release sheet. We'll just send the one page because, they're doing Greek music. They don't care about children's music.
But you send them the disc as well?
And then we send
So you always send them the disc?
Except there's a few cases where we don't send the disc, where we have a really big database. We then will send, on a certain genre, we will likely just send them the new release sheet and then the disc upon request.
Okay, but you will hit every record that's coming out and do something with every record?
Yeah.
Do you ever skip a record and say, there's...
No, it may be that we won't do much with it because we don't have but we will always send.
I guess, the company's putting it out, the job is to sell it.
Exactly.
Okay. I think my ignorance is keeping me from asking you more questions.
Well, feel free to call me, with any. You mentioned what it was and what it is now, and the one thing I did want to talk about is it's interesting because Rounder started selling bluegrass records out of the back of a van.
Yeah.
And we now sell to 6 or 7 companies that sell bluegrass records out of the back of a van. And they're very important to us. They're some of our, the most important way for our music to get out at festivals. And we maintain very close relationships with those customers.
What's the order of magnitude? And I don't even know. This is one where I don't know that I'm going to be able to answer the question. If you sell X number of records through record stores, I guess what percentage of Rounder sales comes from alternative forums of the type that would be within your review?
Last I checked, it was probably about somewhere between 20 and 25%.
Now, how would that? What would that comparable figure be for a Sony or something like that? Would it be higher, lower? Would it...
My sense is that it would be lower, but that may have changed.
I'm not sure.
There was, in a few years back, there was a big, I think that people realized they were missing out on something.
Uh-huh.
And it also depends on whether you view, with the whole Latin explosion, a lot of those guys have set up sort of their Latin divisions and stuff, and it sort of mainstreamed what had been a fringe thing.
Right. Are your outlets overloaded with people selling records? Do people just say no more, or do they want it?
I think that depends on who. We sell to some people who get solicited by everybody,
Yeah.
but they tend to be catalogs, because everyone's trying to get into the catalogs.
Right.
Catalogs. Most of our accounts, I don't think are overwhelmed. Are really overwhelmed. I mean, Rounder puts out a lot of stuff. So anybody who carries the full Rounder line, as well as a lot of other things, would have a lot to inventory and stuff.
Okay.
All right.